Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who have been following the show and following my reviews, and you are many, know that I am fully entrenched into the action film genre. To me, this is just a great way of escapism to go see a good, solid action film. Tonight, I have an exclusive interview with a man who has specialized in action films. Con Air? How about Expendables 2? How about Lara Croft Tomb Raider? And if you want to have an action film that's a little more cerebral, how about The General's Daughter? All good movies. And it didn't always start out this way. The man started with commercials and then music videos, and now his name is synonymous with good action films. And guess what? His latest movie, it's action, but it's not that type of action. It's more of a disaster type movie, and it's really good. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by director Simon West. It's something you don't want to miss. A cinematic class is about to begin, and your professor is in. Simon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Simon, I think it's safe to say I'm going to call you an expert in the action field genre. It is a field that is near and dear to my heart, one of my favorites. I love watching action movies. And you actually have two movies that have earned the very coveted Fist of Fury Award. That would be Con Air with Nicolas Cage and John Cusack, and Expendables 2, which starred everybody and their mother in that one. So certainly high kudos indeed. But, sir, your latest movie, we can consider it an action movie, but it's more of a disaster flick. It's called Skyfire. And while it's been opened in the Asian market for quite some time and doing quite well, we actually get it here in just a few short weeks. Tell us a little bit about Skyfire.
Well, Skyfire is, as you say, it's a disaster movie, and it's about a volcano which everyone thinks, or a certain amount of people think on the island is dormant. But there's one young female scientist who had a tragic accident, which was a very small child, with this very volcano, and has been obsessed with it her whole life, and now has grown up to be an adult volcanologist. And she is monitoring it, and has actually invented this device with sensors all over the volcano to monitor it, so that she, hopes the same thing that happened to her would never happen to anyone else. Unfortunately, there's an entrepreneur who's a dreamer. He's not really a bad guy. He's more, I like to think, more of an Elon Musk dreamer, who decides he wants to turn the island into this wonderful resort, and actually take people to the volcano to look at it and admire it. And he sort of amps it up a bit and tries to make it probably more exciting than he thinks it actually is, because as far as he's concerned, it is dormant. But unfortunately, his excavations and his work on the island unleashes a force that he never envisaged. And then it sort of, to my mind, it sort of transitions between an action disaster movie into almost a monster movie, because the volcano becomes the monster. And because that is the bad guy in the film. And really, it's like awakening a beast that should never been, awoken. And they don't realize the forces they've unleashed. And of course, this thing is trying to kill everybody on the island. And so our story is, how do our group of a small group of scientists and tourists make it off the island before the monster gets them? And so that's how I sort of broadly describe it.
Welcome to the most extraordinary and unforgettable experience available on this planet. Tens of thousands of visitors a month. We've only just begun.
Nature spectacle presented as entertainment.
I mean, only a lunatic would build a world-class resort on a ticking time bomb of molten earth, right?
The mountain's waking up. I need time to study it.
We're all going to be fine.
Explain to the viewers how you approach this movie that deviated from the normal formulaic template disaster film.
Well, as I said, I regarded it as a monster movie because that, to me, films are all about characters, and if you're going to have the world, the Earth turn on the humans, then you have to sort of portray that piece of the Earth as a monster, and so it. Once I decided that's what it was, then I decided where it was going to be, and so I set it on this island, which we actually shot in Malaysia, which was in the real jungles and in the real swamps and surrounded by the real snakes and all the things that go with it. And I tend to try and do as much in camera as possible with my effects and stunts and things like that. Now, obviously, I can't blow up a mountain literally, so I do have to rely on some CGI for some of the larger stuff. But for the majority of action, I try and have real things going on in front of the camera. So the actors are really feeling the heat of the flames and the explosions and the ash and the wind. And it's unpleasant, but you can see that in the performances. And it's unpleasant for us, the crew, as well, because we have to sort of go through it for 100 days as well. But I gathered a crew from all over the world. We were in, essentially, the edge of the Pacific. So I could draw from Australia, Canada, Hollywood, China, Malaysia. I had 17 nationalities on the crew. And so communication, was interesting at some points. Everyone, spoke some English. And my cast were mainly Chinese, some of the best actors in China. I gathered together, and mostly bilingual. So that was easy. I could direct them in English, and I actually shot a lot of the scenes both in English and Chinese. Really? And so again, that was another challenge for me. So I would shoot the scene first in English, and of course that was a breeze. And then I would shoot the scene again in Chinese, where I was much more flying by the seat of my pants. And I did have to rely on very accomplished translator because I obviously know what they're saying, but I need to know the intonation and whether take 2 was more sympathetic than take 3 or take 5 was more aggressive. And so I rely on a sort of a more of a creative translator to tell me the intonation between the takes. And then during editing, I choose which scene I keep in English and which scene I keep in Chinese. Or sometimes I have an actor, Jason Isaacs, in a scene who didn't speak any Chinese, but I played it that he actually understands it. So I could mix languages within one scene. So it's a very international feel as you get. If you went to one of these Antarctic expeditions or Amazon expeditions, there's a huge collection of different nationalities, and you hear all these languages mixed up. So that, to me, gave it an authentic kind of international scientific feel.
Now, you must have had a pretty good time working with a diverse crew, and even with the Chinese, because if I'm not mistaken, your next movie is coming from that region too. This is going to be Legend Hunters?
Yes, and that one was. I mean, I think I got a little full of myself, and that one I actually shot entirely in Chinese with no English, and that's really is intended for the Chinese audience. So I mean, we did have a great time, and we got along, and also Skyfire opened #1 in the box office in China. So then I was offered this chance to do an entirely Chinese film, which was a whole nother experience. Luckily, it did have a lot of action in it and a lot of stunts and effects and everything, so I could feel comfortable with that. And it had a lot less dialogue actually than Skyfire, so that's even more of a roller coaster ride. But that's that little chapter of my life is my my 2 Chinese movies.
Now, these Chinese movies, Simon, did they come around because of some of the production restrictions caused by this virus? I know things in China are a little more open. In fact, their box office, I think, is one of the only box offices that's flourishing and open and raking in a lot of money. Did that have a lot to do with your decision to go over there and make films there?
No, I mean, I actually made it before the pandemic hit, so I actually dodged the whole thing. And actually, the Chinese release of Skyfire just got out before the pandemic started. Mm-hmm. So in that way, I was lucky. But they do seem to have got back up on their feet quicker. So my next film, when it's released, that one has so many effects and visual effects in it. Unlike all my other films, which are all in camera, that one was a huge CGI endeavor. So there's like a year of CGI on that. So by the time that one comes out, I'm sure it'll be even easier to go to the movies in China. So, so I was just lucky that I missed that whole thing.
Are we going to get Legend Hunters, or is it strictly for the Asian box office?
I'm hoping so, because I did work really hard, and it was one of the biggest shoots I've ever done, and it was a gigantic production, and hopefully the sheer size of it will bring it over to the West, because it was an epic shoot, but primarily aimed at the Chinese market. But they are, those films, if they're of a certain type and a certain standard, I think they do come over and do very well in a certain market.
Well, last year you were actually appointed as a judge at the Beijing International Film Festival. So did you see something? Oh, I guess what I'm doing is playing the old English professor, and I'm asking you to compare and contrast, if you will, some of the things that you saw, like in the Beijing International Film Festival, and what would be comparable or how they differ from what's typically released out of Hollywood.
Well, I think the end product of Chinese cinema and Western cinema is not that different in some ways. That they like a lot of emotion in their films, and they play very heavily on family ties, and their films are very heavily. We might in Hollywood spend weeks and weeks talking about the plot, and how to plug the holes in the plot and how to do the plot, and there's a bit of character thrown in here and there. But the Chinese will. It's all about family, and it's all about the emotional links, and it's all about that part of it. And if there's if the plot has to make a few leaps, that's fine, because the audience would rather have the emotional thread being as tight as possible rather than the plot. It's a different way of thinking, and then production is very different. There is that we're very plan orientated in the West. Like in Hollywood, it's so expensive to shoot that every minute of the day is planned to the ultimate ever. So when you're on the set, you've already spent 6 months, a year planning what you're doing every day. So there's not a lot of room for maneuver on the day or improvisation, because it's very expensive. But in China, they don't tend to prep so much. They have very long shoots. So, and they can change things on the shoot, and they can improvise, and they can elaborate and make things up. And it's, people sort of, bed in on a film in China, and they might be on it a year or 2 years. But that's the shoot, and that's really when everything happens. What we tend to do is plan for a year and then shoot for 3 or 4 months, because that's the expensive part. And it's just a different philosophy of how things are done. But it is fascinating, and they were picking my brains, constantly, because they want to know, what is the difference as well, and why in the West and in Hollywood we have it as such a business. I think in China it's still much more of an art form, and each film is done very differently to the other films, and it's very quirky. How one director works is completely different to another, and they don't have the same rigid structure that we have. We have computer programs that allocate everything per day, per minute, and they're much more still on an artistic point of view. And I think they're looking to industrialize their film business the way Hollywood has.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems like you kind of favor this emotional content in the Chinese film more so than, say, having to explain every little plot twist inside the movie. Other than maybe that philosophy, which you're adapting from them, what do you feel in working with them and being part of their film festival judge and what have you? What do you think you're offering to the Chinese film industry?
Well, again, it's I think they are looking to learn how everybody around the world does things, and Hollywood has really set the standard. And so whatever Western country you're shooting in, you're usually shooting the sort of Hollywood system, and and as I said, their system is quite different. And I think they're looking for a way to make more films more efficiently, because they have even with finance, they sort of every film is financed in a different way to the last one. They don't have the studio system, or they don't have sort of classic independent film financiers that all they do is finance films. They go out to lots of different types of people to finance films. So I think what they're looking for is how to make it, like I say, an industrial version of filmmaking. And my thing to them was like, but you've got to keep it creative. You don't want to be making sausages. That's the trick in Hollywood, is how to be creative within the system. And we are very regulated and very efficient, but don't forget that you have to make it creative. The audience will spot it straight away if you're just churning out the same thing every time. And so that's what I try to impress upon them is, yes, it's good to be efficient and have a plan, but only in as much as it gives you the space and the time to be creative and come up with a great new idea within that framework. So I hope they don't forget that, because that is the hardest thing in the Hollywood system, is to still do something fresh and creative when you're pretty much working within a very tight framework.
Very true. Simon, since we're comparing and contrasting, let's do another one here. You actually started out doing some assistant directing with the BBC. How was your work with the BBC? How did it prepare you for Hollywood, or how didn't it prepare you for Hollywood?
I actually started in editing in the BBC, and so editing, I think, is like one of the best ways to learn filmmaking. I made films when I was a kid with a Super 8 camera, and I did everything. I shot them, I cut them, I was in them, I did everything, built the props. I didn't know there was different jobs necessarily. I knew there's a cameraman and director, but I didn't really understand so much what the editor did and what a contributor it was to the whole process. So I by chance, the only job I could get in the film business was assistant editor. But I'm really thankful and going through the editing process, because it taught me so much. And I worked at the BBC on documentaries, current affairs, drama, like classic, traditional English drama, Dickensian stuff and Shakespearean stuff, but also improvised drama and things like that. And even working on a news and current affairs program, I learned a lot. And so every time I'm out filming, a movie, I draw on those things. Documentaries teaches you to make a story out of what you have, not what you intended to get. You may not have got what you wanted. And news and current affairs teaches you not to panic when you're running out of time. Because, I still remember those sort of broadcast news moments where, we're running down the corridor, with the film that, the anchor is announcing the item and you're still editing it and you're running down the corridor with the film and throwing it on just as they announce it. So that kind of adrenaline and producing something every day instead of, over years, helped a lot. So, and then obviously, improvised drama. I worked with some great directors at the BBC who taught me how to work with actors and how to get the best out of actors and how to trust them and make them comfortable so they give you your best work. And so you become a partner with the actor instead of an audience who's like, or a boss who's demanding things. You actually a partner, and like, how can I make the actor give me the best performance without frightening them most of the time.
You went from the music videos, okay, and then I think it was in '97, jumped into Con Air. Simon, that's a big jump. Draw the bridge for us there. How you got from the music videos into Con Air?
Well, actually, but really, I was a short time in videos, but I went to commercials between, which was the big stepping stone, because I was looking around at how to get into films. And in the UK, in Britain, most of the film directors at that time had gone through commercials, like Ridley Scott and Tony Scott and Adrian Lyne and Hugh Hudson. There was a whole line of, and they'd all gone through commercials and made these sort of fantastic, elaborate, big, expensive commercials, and then got their films off the ground. So I just did the same thing. I deliberately joined a company that made commercials as well as music videos, and they also had another satellite company in LA. And so I immediately said, well, can I go and work through the LA office? Because that was obviously in Hollywood. So I did commercials in the States for a while. I ended up doing the Super Bowl commercials, which was, the sort of zenith of commercials. And that's when I got spotted by Jerry Bruckheimer to come in and do Con Air. And so, I'd shot hundreds and hundreds of commercials and thousands of feet of film all over the world, in airplanes, underwater, and all. So technically, I had a lot of knowledge and skill. I hadn't, shot a feature film, and that was the shock, was the size of it, because the commercial, you often shoot one day, or 7 days is a very long commercial. Right. And then suddenly I was on a 120-day shoot. So that it was a leap in a stamina-wise and everything. Technically, I knew what I was doing, but culturally, suddenly having a cast of all those incredible actors was a different thing altogether. And I sort of, was made a rod for my own back in a way, because Jerry is incredibly supportive of his directors and has a very big checkbook, and says, go out and get all your favorite actors, whatever actor you want. And so I just went and hired all my favorite indie actors who weren't really action movie actors. Right. And they, none of them could turn me down, because I was paying them 4 times the amount that they'd ever earned on any other film. And so, having gathered those great actors together, then I had to sort of marshal them and go, oh my God, now we need to make a film together. And the ironic thing was, of course, in commercials, I had mostly done comedy commercials. I was a comedy director, because it was the only ones that had actors and dialogue in. And so I was actually burnt out on comedy. So I deliberately chose an action film for my first film, because it wasn't comedy. And I didn't really know anything about action. I had never fired a gun. I'd never thrown a punch in a film. I'd never done a big stunt or anything like that. And so I really had to teach myself on the ground as I was making Con Air, day by day. It was like a most expensive film school you can imagine. And but at the heart of it, I feel like I probably didn't turn off the comedy muscle, and really Con Air ended up being quite a bit of a comedy with some big action in the background. So I couldn't really get away.
But a lot of those action movies do that, though. A lot of the action.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've started to do that, or they did afterwards. But before that, I think the classic. It was sort of there were one-liners. You blow something up, you say a one-liner. You blow something up, and I think that kind of weird, bizarre, ironic, character-based humor was slightly different. And so I think it's much more prevalent now, because I think the humor has got very sophisticated in action movies now. Yeah. Because they are very funny. Whereas before, I think they were kind of a little bit more cheesy. They were a bit more, that kind of classic Bond, one-liner after the big scene. But so yeah, that was how I transitioned.
We're talking about some influence you've had on things, and I'm going to apologize up front, because I know I'm not going to say this right, but are you still on the board of directors for, help me with this word, Aberystwyth University?
Oh, Aberystwyth.
Oh, Aberystwyth. Okay, I knew I would butcher that.
Yeah, it's Welsh. It's Welsh. So Aber means mouth of, and Ystwyth is the river that goes through it. So it's the mouth of the Ystwyth River, Aberystwyth.
Are you still on their board of directors?
Yes, but very occasionally because of this pandemic, we haven't really been able to get together recently. But yeah, I had it was the initial setup of their film program was what I was mostly involved with. That was sort of saying what I think should be on it, what I would look for in candidates coming out of that system, things like that. So my involvement was really at the setup of it, not so much, once it's running now.
I see. I went online and I took a look at their program. I thought it was really impressive. So that's nice to know that you had the, those kids that will be coming out of there eventually, I guess are coming out trained in your system. If it was your,
well, I hope so. Yeah, because some of it's selfish reasons. Is I want to have them trained so when they come to me for a job, I can say, okay, you're doing, they're working the right system, and I can get screenwriters out of there and cameramen and all the things I need of my own private film school.
Yeah, cool. Simon, I really appreciate you taking the time to out of your busy schedule to sit and talk with us. I just enjoyed the living daylights out of Skyfire. I was able to see it, over a month in advance before it's going to be released here in the States, and I just think this thing is a whole lot of fun. I mean, just hooping and hollering at the screen. I hope you have a ton of success with it, at least as much as we can get. God knows what's going to be open in a few weeks when it opens up, and what's going to be closed, and how the streaming device. I mean, that's all kind of sort of up in the air. So hopefully, that stuff will right itself now that we have a vaccine. And
yeah, no, I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else does. It's a bit of escapism is the main thing.
Oh, it is big time, and I'm really looking forward to Legend Hunters too. That you teased that very well. That sounds really, really good. We'll be back with more right after this.
Yeah, no, that's what it's all about, right?
Skyfire, a monster movie about a volcano. Kind of like the way that sounds. Thanks again to Simon West. Interesting individual and great filmmaker. So that now that you have learned what you have learned, here endeth your lesson.